Yes, we are.
Good evening. My name is President Heminger, and I call this meeting to order, our first meeting of the year for 2023. Before we get started, I see that we have Pastor Davis on the line, and I see Sister Dunkley as well. Pastor Davis, would you mind opening us up in a word of prayer?
Of course. Let us look to the Lord in prayer. Gracious and loving Lord, we are so grateful for this day, for life, for health, and for strength, and for the opportunity to be here amongst our brothers and our sisters, our friends and our neighbors. We ask your blessings upon our president, upon the executive board, and upon each member of the NAACP. We also ask your blessings upon this meeting tonight. All that we will hear, help us to be able to process these things well and to put to good use our skills, gifts, talents, and abilities so that we can make Arlington and our world a better place. This we pray in your name. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Next up, Madam Secretary, would you please call the roll?
Yes. We have President Heminger, who is present. First Vice President James Younger.
Present.
Second Vice President Brian Coleman.
Present.
Third Vice President Laurel Langhorne will be on shortly. Treasurer Adriana Spain.
Present.
Assistant Treasurer Kenya Pennington.
Present.
I'm Secretary Wanda Younger, present. Assistant Secretary Kathleen McSweeney.
I think she just joined.
Okay. Executive Committee at Large, Karen Nightingale. Karen Nightingale. Executive Committee at Large, Kellen McBeth.
Present.
Executive Committee at Large, Nadia Conyers. Nadia Conyers. Communications, Leah Matterall. Leah Matterall. Criminal Justice, Heather Kelly.
Present.
Economic Development, Megan Brew. Housing, Brian Coleman is present. Housing, Vice Chair Wells Harrell.
Present.
Religious Affairs, Rosa Dunkley.
Present.
Scholarship, Adora Williams. Adora Williams. I believe I saw her on, so she's present. That concludes the roll call, and I placed the agenda in the chat.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. In order for us to continue with the agenda that the Executive Committee adopted, we would need to suspend the rules. Is there a motion to suspend the rules?
I move to suspend the rules.
Thank you, First Vice President. Is there a second?
Second.
Second.
Who was the second? I didn't hear the first one.
It was Heather. Heather
okay.
Kelly.
Thank you, Madam Chair. All in favor of suspending the rules, please say aye.
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 All opposed have the same right. All right, awesome. So let's proceed with the agenda that the Executive Committee has adopted. But before we do, I'd like to turn it over to the Treasurer to discuss the financial report. Madam Treasurer.
Good evening, everyone. So this is the Treasurer's report for December of 2022. We had in revenue $11,191.17. In expenses, we had $4,125.89, and our balance in our savings account is $320,341.39, and in our checking account, the balance is $29,652.17. So that is the Treasurer's report.
Thank you so much, Madam Treasurer. Any further discussion on the financial report? Any further discussion on the financial report? All right, is there a motion to adopt the financial report as presented by the Treasurer?
Motion to adopt.
Thank you, Second VP. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. And could you identify yourself?
Rosa Dunkley.
Thank you, Mr. Dunkley. All in favor of adopting the treasurer's report as presented, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? The ayes have it. The treasurer's report is adopted. All right, before we go on to just my own remarks, I wanted to recognize some of our distinguished guests that are joining us. I thought I saw the immediate past president. Are you on tonight?
How you doing, Mr. President?
How you doing, Mr. President? Would you like a couple moments to say hello to the NAACP Arlington branch?
No, sir. No, you have it, Mr. President. I'm just going to stay out of your way and just watch tonight. Have fun.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. President. I see we have our Commonwealth's attorney on tonight, Parissa Degani Tafti. Would you like 30 seconds to say remarks to the branch?
Well, I hadn't prepared any remarks, but it's lovely to be here. Thank you, as always, for the amazing work of the NAACP.
Thank you for being on tonight. I see we have County Board Member Ms. Garvey's on. Ms. Garvey, would you like 30 seconds to address the membership?
15 seconds. Happy New Year, everybody. It's great to be here. Thanks.
Happy New Year. Thank you for being
It's still the new year. We're still January.
Let's see. Did I miss any other elected officials? Going through the roll here. I don't see anyone else. If I missed anyone, go ahead and come off mute and address the members. Okay, I'd like to take a point of personal privilege and recognize Ms. Joan Mulholland. I see that you're on with us tonight. Would you like to take 15 seconds to address the membership, freedom fighter? Ms. Mulholland, are you with us? All right, we'll come back to Joan Mulholland. Okay, awesome. I got a couple remarks. I'm not going to take the entire 10 minutes. We'll keep things moving along to hear from our speakers. I would like to just kick off the meeting with a brief moment of silence. We all know that former First Vice President Kent Carter would be with us tonight, but he isn't. So I'd like to take a moment just to honor his legacy and honor all the work that he's done on behalf of the NAACP. Thank you so much. We'll never forget the work that former First Vice President has done, and he's an inspiration for all of us to continue moving forward. Next on the agenda is our financial audit. Every year we do a financial audit, and we appoint members to a committee to kind of review our finances and make sure that all is well and to make sure that everything is in order. And so tonight, I'd like to call on at least 3 volunteers to join that committee to audit our finances, take a look at last year, and just to make sure that there are no anomalies and to make sure that all is well in our finances. Would there be 3 members willing to volunteer? You can raise your hand or drop your name in the chat. We'd love to hear from you. Any 3 members? Okay, I see we have Mr. Pletcher. Thank you so much. Awesome. We need 2 more people to help with our financial audit. 2 more people. It's not very much work. All right, I'm going to come back to this at the end of the meeting. I'm being told that Joan Mulholland is now with us. So, Joan, would you like to take 30 seconds to address our members?
Yeah, sorry about my confusion the first time with all this technology. You know, I'm an old lady.
That's okay.
But I want you all to get out there and get in some good trouble and keep on keeping on. Okay.
All right, hang on one second. I want to bring you up with me so everybody can see it. Thank you, Joan, for all that you've done. I mean, we're honored that you're with us tonight. And for those of you that don't know Ms. Mulholland's history, I encourage you to do some research, but we have a fellow freedom fighter right here alongside with us. So thank you, Joan, for being with us tonight.
Thank you.
All right, awesome. I saw in the chat we might have had one more person. It looks like Miss Mancia. Thank you so much. We are grateful to for your service to the branch. Our secretary and treasurer will be in touch with you soon, okay? All right, we need one more volunteer, so I'll come back to that later in the meeting. Next, I wanted to just talk about just briefly the state of missing middle. I won't take up too much because I know some of you have questions that you'd like to ask county board member and Chair Dorsey when he speaks. But the NAACP is very disappointed with the outcome of the county board's decision to strike 8. We're still fully engaged. We're still fully involved. We're not taking our foot off of the gas pedal. So there's more to come, more to follow. And I'll allow Chair Dorsey to answer some of the questions that have come in a little bit. Next up, I want to just briefly highlight there's an event on February 8th. Our faith leaders, and particularly the Arlington Coalition of Black Clergy, is going to be hosting a forum on the missing middle. So Pastor Davis, if I could call on you again, or Brian Coleman, I'd love to yield to you if you want to maybe address the members and provide them with just a brief update on what they can expect on February 8th.
Thank you, Mr. President, and I will yield to Brian.
All right, thank you. So just to briefly go over what we'll be seeing on February 8th, the Housing Committee has been coordinating with our Religious Affairs Committee to set up an event open to the public that's geared towards specifically an informational setting. So we want people to be able to come in and be able to interact with the information freely. They'll get a presentation which will be accompanied with a Q&A session. As incentive to register, the Housing Committee will be answering those questions that are presented first in the registration. So if you register to attend, those questions will be the first to be addressed in our Q&A session. The beginning 30 minutes will be a short presentation put together by our committee, and those panelists on the event will then answer the questions first that have been submitted through registrant, and then afterwards any remaining questions will be answered in turn. So really appreciate anyone being able to come out. It is at 7 p.m. at Callaway UMC on February 8th, and I hope to see you there.
All right, thank you so much, Mr. Second Vice President. I will be there as well, and I hope to see many of you there on this very important discussion and conversation that's going on in our community currently. Ms. Adora, can I call on you to just give a brief update on scholarships and to talk about the current status?
So the scholarship application is live. If you all have seen it, it goes out with the branch communications. We've been sending it around. I appreciate everyone sharing it with high school students or seniors, high school seniors that you know that are looking for opportunities for college funding. This year we have added a couple of different scholarship options. So one that is going to be geared, oh, sorry. You know I hate video, right?
All right.
I gotta find it. I'm on my phone. I apologize.
Okay.
Is this, can you see me?
Yep,
so one option is for our local students who are going to be staying local, going to George Mason, Nova. We want to have an opportunity for them. And then another one is giving priority to students who are heading to HBCUs. So if you know students, particularly in those buckets, please encourage them to apply. And then, of course, I wouldn't be the scholarship chair without mentioning that scholarships don't happen without money, right? So if you are so inclined, we always are looking for, we want our branch to be supporting our students. So if you're so inclined and you have the treasure to give, please donate to the NAACP, the branch scholarship fund, so that we can continue to support these wonderful students that we get. We're going to be putting out a call for scholarship readers later next month, or in February. So be on the lookout for that. That's a great way for you to see how fabulous our community students are and read their scholarship applications and get a sense for what we're really doing here to support these students. So we appreciate your time, your treasure, that you can give if you're so inclined to give. So support our scholarships, donate. When the call comes out, volunteer to read applications. I know there's some people on here who've read before, and everyone has always said it is it's a very fulfilling endeavor to read these scholarships and help these students. So that's
awesome.
Pretty much all I have.
Thank you so much, Ms. Adora. We really appreciate it. You know, in our early conversations, one of the things that I've told, you know, Ms. Adora is that we want it to be bigger and better than ever before. If you know me, you know I'm competitive. And so we got former immediate past President Spain on the line, and everything we do this year is going to be bigger and better. And speaking of being bigger and better, we're moving right along. We're actually ahead of schedule. So we're going to go ahead and transition to our first Vice President for any remarks that you'd like to share with the body. First VP.
Good evening.
Oh, Mr. VP, you're on mute.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
I am truly looking forward to working with everyone throughout the course of this year. One of the things I will point out is that I am truly, truly saddened by the recent death at the hands of police in Memphis. Despite the fact that we've increased in technology, almost everybody has a cell phone. We've got in-car cameras, body-worn cameras, police oversight. It doesn't seem that the calculus regarding police misconduct has really changed that much. So one of the things that I'm going to be an advocate of throughout the course of this year, locally, statewide, and even nationally, to the extent that I can, is seeking to change hiring practices and get departments and organizations to change hiring practices, because we really need to move towards doing what the Obama report said, and that is hire officers who have a guardian mentality rather than a warrior mentality. So to me, that's what's really going to make the difference. I think we can have all the technology and all the oversight, but if you don't hire people, the right people at the front end, you're still going to have problems. So that's what I'm going to be challenged with and trying to work on during the course of this year.
Thank you, Mr. First VP. If you're not familiar, he's referring to policies on 21st century policing. I'd encourage you to take a look at that. Second VP, would you like to take a minute to address the membership?
Yes, thank you. So I'm extremely happy to be in this position working for the community at a higher capacity, and in this moment, of course, also serving as our housing chair. But aside from housing matters, especially on issues related to fair housing and our missing middle, to name a few, I'm also with our education and criminal justice committees. We feel that we need to realize the triangle that I like to depict it as between education, housing, and criminal justice to build wealth and prosperity. So I'm looking forward to working not only with those on the call, but also with our local leaders and partners within the community to further this. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Second VP. And I know our third VP had a time conflict. Are you with us, third VP? Okay, we'll come back to third VP for her remarks. All right, let's go ahead and transition over to our speakers. Tonight, we have both the chair of the Arlington Public Schools Board and the chair of the Arlington County Board. Going first is Mr. Reid Goldstein. He's the chair of the Arlington School Board. Mr. Goldstein joined the Arlington School Board in 2016, and he currently serves as chair of the board. He has an extensive record of advocacy and volunteerism in his neighborhood, Arlington Public Schools, and in the greater Arlington community. Mr. Goldstein, are you with us tonight?
I am.
Okay,
Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you for being with us. Give us a moment to find you. We're going to spotlight you. And I understand that you have a presentation as well. Is that right?
I do. And my understanding is that it was sent to you. And so my question is, are you going to put it up on the screen, or is that something I need to do?
Madam Secretary, are you prepared to share the presentation? There we go. She's on top of it.
All right.
The floor is yours, sir. We will do about 15 minutes of remarks and then about 10 minutes for questions. Take it away.
Okay, thank you. So since you're hosting or presenting the presentation, I'm going to have to ask you to advance the slides, and perfect timing. So let me first say that everything I say in this presentation are my views only. I'm not speaking for the whole school board. I'm not speaking for Arlington Public Schools, except where noted. And that usually is to describe something that in the past the board has voted on, then I can say, well, the board, did this or something like that. But as far as current or future opinions, anything that I, voice is really only mine and, doesn't represent the consensus of the school board. So could I go to the next slide, please? Thanks. And here's the agenda. And I should note that I'll send a copy of this presentation. Oh, I don't know if you have I guess I'll make sure I send you a PDF copy of this presentation and you can share it with your membership. And I'm not going to read all of this stuff to you because I hate it when people do that. And could you go to the next slide, please? Okay, thanks. So first, let me say, I'm here with the County Board Chair, Christian Dorsey, and thought that would be a good time to note all of the collaboration and cooperation we've got going on between Arlington Public Schools and the Arlington County government. Obviously, one of the biggest things for Arlington Public Schools and the county is the budget, because we get most of our funding from the county budget. And of course, APS is the largest single line item for county expenditures. But, in addition to the budget, we collaborate on things like student transportation and developing fields that the whole community can use, community centers, crossing guards, nurses. They share birth rates with us, which roll into the enrollment projections that we do. Our collaboration with the county has increased, I don't know how many fold in the last, I'm going to say 5 or 6 years. And as a result, we're able to, deliver better services. We all are able to deliver better services for fewer dollars because of this collaboration. So if you go to the next slide, please. And this is a description of, what the board does, the school board does. Primarily, our state law mandated duties are to adopt an annual budget, to hire the superintendent, to do a capital improvement plan, and to develop and revise policies. And some of these other things, are obvious tasks that we undertake, although some of them, I guess the last 3 bullets are not really enshrined in state law. But anybody who knows us knows what we do. We do a heck of a lot more than, what you see here on the slide. So can you go to the next slide, please? Okay, and quick overview of what the org chart looks like. We hire the superintendent to be the operational manager of the school system. The school board has an oversight role. The superintendent has creates an organizational chart, as you can see, in order to more effectively, pursue the job of running the school system. So he's got several, different departments, where he calls them chiefs. This is his cabinet: chief operating officer, chief of staff, chief of school support, et cetera. They all, of course, have, large sub-organizational charts below them. Next slide, please. And so every year, about the beginning of the school year, the school board creates a budget direction for the superintendent, which is to guide him in compiling and developing his budget for the following fiscal year. So he's been doing that since the fall with the budget direction you see provided here. That superintendent's proposed budget, he will unveil on February 23rd, and that will be the beginning of our budget season, as we call it, followed by several budget work sessions where we talk about, the what's and the whys and the hows of what's in his budget. And there's another slide later on that talks about the timeline here. So could we go to the next slide, please? Oh yeah, so I got a couple of slides on the actual language of the budget direction, preparing a needs-based budget, aligning it to the board priorities. One of the specifics we put into it this year was to make sure there are resources for a study of planning factors that are developed with an equity lens. Our planning factors, a few of them get changed every year. Many are static. Many go back many, many, many years. And we decided it's time that we take a look at these planning factors, what they were originally designed to achieve, whether they're still achieving that, how they need to be adjusted to do so or eliminated, what other planning factors need to be created. And all of that will be done by a consultant. We're in the process of developing an RFP, a request for proposal. We intend to get the consultant on board sometime in late winter, early spring, and have that consultant's work done by fall. So the results of that can roll into the superintendent's budget as he compiles it for the next year. So that would be for fiscal 25. Next slide, please. Right, and this is the rest of the verbiage that's in the budget direction, which is a little bit more boilerplate, details for changes that occur, recommendations for strategic changes, forecast, et cetera. Next slide, please. Yeah, and here's the budget calendar. All right, so you see at the top, the February 23rd, the superintendent's proposed budget rolls out. March, and we have the first budget work session immediately thereafter. So February 23rd is a school board meeting, but the only item of business is for the superintendent to propose his budget. Then we move into a work session and you start asking questions about it. Several more work sessions after that throughout March. There'll be a public hearing on the superintendent's proposed budget, which of course is open to everybody. All of these meetings are open meetings, which are open to everybody to attend. The public hearing is the opportunity for the public to step up to the podium and speak and give comments. Following all of these work sessions, the school board is going to propose its own budget, which is a function of taking the superintendent's budget and making changes that the school board decides are necessary. Maybe some cuts here, maybe some additions there, and maybe none if, we decide that his budget is perfect. But, it's a 500-page document and it does generate a lot of questions, discussion. Maybe we should move the focus over here, move some more money over there. And those are the kinds of things that happen in March and that yield then the school board's proposed budget. Immediately following that, we have a joint budget work session with our county board colleagues And then depending on some other details that, may or may not have occurred, like information from the state on the governor's budget, or, changes from the county, or, anything like that, that would occur in the budget work session number 5. Then there's another public hearing, this one on the school board's proposed budget. And if necessary, we have another work session. Then finally, we'll adopt the final fiscal 24 budget on May 11th. And so that would take effect when the 2024 fiscal year starts, which is July 1st of this year, July 1st, 2023. And can you go to the next slide, please? Okay, and so these are the school board's priorities that we enshrined in a different document. Student well-being and academic progress, investing in the high quality and diverse workforce, and our third priority is to improve operational efficiency. And if you go to the next slide, please. And these are the superintendent's priorities. Now he takes the priorities that we've articulated and he figures out how a work plan for himself and how he's going to achieve the things that we have decided are important. So his priorities come under the umbrella of this, I guess, initiative, you'd call it, which is Every Student Counts, Excellence for All. And in that, he feels it's very important to know every student by name, strength, and need, and developing a culture focused on assets, and these other paragraphs that, like I said, trying not to read everything on the slide to you. Can you go to the next slide, please? And here's a little more detail on the Every Student Counts and Excellence for All initiative. And this front and back document you see in the center and the right is available on the website and is available in printer friendly form, because there's a lot of detail on it, and I know it's difficult to see here on a screen. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is some of the new stuff we've got for this school year. So we have purchased virtual tutoring for all secondary students, 6 through 12 grade students, from a company called Paper. Now, it just cracks me up all the time that there's virtual tutoring being done by a company called Paper. Don't ask me why they're called Paper, but that's the company that's doing it. We have new learning resources for the core courses, safety and security enhancements that are being done at school buildings using capital money, capital improvement money. We are back to school meals for the last 2 years. Since the pandemic started, the Department of Agriculture has waived the necessity for students to pay for school meals. Instead, they said every student, regardless of need, every student gets free meals. But they ended that program this past summer. So we're back to charging students for the school meals. In the transportation department, there's a new mobile app called Where's the Bus for parents to track bus arrival times. And, sometimes buses leave late from school and they're not at the bus stop when parents expect them to be, or, have trouble getting to school because of traffic. And so this mobile app is the antidote to parents trying to call the transportation department and trying to find out, where the particular bus is. And then, of course, we have a new expanded code of conduct. And if you could go to the next slide, please. Okay, and the student progress dashboard is now available, as is the equity profile dashboard. This is new this year. You can find them at the links at the bottom of the slide. And the next slide, please. And these are our upcoming monitoring items. At every school board meeting, we have at least one monitoring item. And this is the schedule of those monitoring items for the rest of the school year, where we hear from those departments like the English Learners Department or Professional Learning about what is going on in their department. Now, these are already established departments and initiatives. These aren't new initiatives. We're monitoring the progress of what those departments are doing. And, as you can see, the departments that are the cognizant ones for producing those monitoring items. If you could go to the next slide, please. How am I doing on time? I'm getting pretty close to the end. So our current initiatives, of course, are the virtual learning program task force, where we are trying to understand how many people need virtual learning and also what virtual learning options there are for students, whether through need or through interest. How do we connect with the virtual offerings that are out there? One of the things that the pandemic did for us was, open the doors to a huge array of virtual options that students can connect to. So we're trying to figure out a way to work that into the curriculum, it being the third decade of the 21st century. And it's incumbent upon us to, recognize this opportunity and provide it. Equity profile dashboard. The community conversations related to that. That's going on with our Chief Diversity, Equity and Inclusion Officer. The Arlington Career Center project is going to break ground later this year. No, 25. And no, the summer of 24, in the summer of 24, but all of the work necessary for it is going on now. School board policy updates. We have about 190 policies. We are on a cycle of trying to update 30 to 50 policies a year. State law says we need to take a look at all of our policies at least once every 5 years. So these policies need to change sometimes because they refer to state law and state law changes. Sometimes they refer to a department that, we don't have anymore, but did. So the maintenance on school board policies is continual. The Your Voice Matters survey comes out every other year, and we're still in the process of, although the results have been distributed, doing the analysis and following up on what it is that the survey told us. And finally, facility renewal planning. A year from now, we should be getting a report from our facilities folks talking about what kind of refurbishment or renewal all of our school buildings have. And I think we've got 43 or 44 of them. Some of them, as you know, are quite old, some are new. Even the new ones, however, things break. But with the old ones, what needs to be done? How can they be refurbished? Facility maintenance is an ongoing thing. It has to be done in order to have appropriate spaces for the students. And so the results of what the facilities department tells us will roll into the capital improvement plan discussions next spring, because we do capital improvement every other year on the even numbered years. And if you could go to the next slide, please. I promise I'm going to be done soon. Okay, and here's how you can get information on planning projects. And mostly it's going to that email address or the link at the bottom, apsva.us/engage. And next slide, please. And oh yeah, here's our academic performance bright spots. Overall standards of learning performance improved in the core subjects. Math improved some percentage points. You can read the rest here by yourself. Next slide, please. And APS was ranked #1 best place to teach and #2 best school division in Virginia by this website called Niche. And of course, we are all the schools are fully accredited by the Virginia Department of Education. Next slide, please. And here's how you stay connected with the school board. You can speak at a board meeting. You can receive monthly newsletters. You can sign up for open office hours with board members, which occur every 2 weeks. You can follow us on, Twitter and Facebook. You can email the board. You can call. You can set up appointments, to speak with board members individually. And of course, my email address is there on the right. And as always, please don't hesitate to contact me with, questions, things you want to discuss, set up a time to meet for coffee, anything like that. Next slide, please. And that's it. Sorry, I think I went over time a little bit. Mike?
That's okay. We're actually way ahead of schedule. So we can do 15 minutes of questions for you and 15 minutes of questions for Chair Dorsey. I'd like to take the first question from our chat, and I believe it was from Miss Latanya. Would you like to come off mute and ask your question?
Hello, I don't know if you can hear me. I'm at the airport.
Okay, I can read it for you as well. Would you prefer me to do that?
Yes, please. Thank you.
Got it. What is the school board strategy for diversifying APS teaching staff? Can you provide the current teaching staff demographics and their projected goal?
I can't provide that here and now, but I'll be happy to, take notes from the chat and, anything that I can't answer here, I'll find out, I'll put it in writing and I'll send it to you and you can distribute it to your membership. So I can't really say, what the strategy is. We have, I know for years, recruited staff from HBCUs. That, recruitment is it's a form of art, within human resources. And I'm just not read into exactly what all of their steps and strategies are, but I will find that out and send you the answer.
Okay, awesome. We appreciate that. From what I heard, it sounds like you're not familiar with the exact strategy, but there is a strategy to help diversify. Is that right?
There absolutely is.
Okay, great. Our next question comes from Ms. Green. Would you like to come off mute and ask your question?
Yes, thank you very much. Mr. Goldstein, we're hearing in the community virtually every day now about serious mental health issues among students and really concerning growing drug and alcohol abuse at the middle and high school levels. And I'm wondering what the school board intends to do about those.
Yeah, thanks for the question, Marjorie. So we have, as you know, our student support department, which is composed of the counselors, the psychologists, and the, I'm missing somebody. Yeah, anyway, it'll come to me. And they have been pursuing and emphasizing social emotional learning as well as lessons related to, mental health. We're also collaborating with the county and their Department of Human Services, on mental health. And I got to tell you, we were delighted to hear about Virginia Hospital Center planning to create a new behavioral health center at that property there on South Carolyn Springs Road. Again, I can get more details for you. And send them to Mike for distribution to the whole membership.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And thank you, Ms. Green, for your question. Ms. Murphy, would you like to ask your question? Ms. Ann Murphy, are you with us? You might be on mute if you're speaking.
I am here, sorry. Apologize for that. I was just wondering, given all of the conversation and hoopla actually going on in the county about the rezoning, the upzoning, et cetera, with a lot of people claiming that, you know, increasing density in Arlington is going to create this huge problem, so people seem to say, with regard to the schools. And so I'm just wondering, what kind of strategy is the school board use, or the superintendent, with regard to, you know, projecting the future potential for future growth, which of course then requires some problems with facilities?
Yeah, great question. There's about 3 answers to that. One is, well, let me take the question, how do we do enrollment projections? So we start with birth rates, which are given to us by the county and the state. And from the birth rates, then we calculate how many of those students are going to become Arlington Public School students 5 years later when they enter kindergarten. From that, then we switch to what's called the cohort progression ratio, which basically means we know how many first graders are going to become second graders the next year. We know how many second graders are going to become third graders. We have an index on that. That's not the hard part. The hard part is knowing how many children are being born and how many of them are going to stay in Arlington or become Arlington Public School students. So that's where, there's a lot of projection expertise and, magic. So that's the enrollment part. We have a document or algorithm or something called the student generation factor. And what it says is we can expect this many students to come from 100 single-family detached homes. We can expect that many students to come from duplexes. We can expect another number, amount of students to come from high-rise apartments, a different number to come from garden apartments. So in answer to your question about the missing middle, when we know what the missing middle exact details are, whether it's going to be, whether they're going to allow 6 plexes and will they allow them in every neighborhood and, unrestricted, will it only be 4 plexes or 2 plexes or whatever? When we know that, we can plug that into our student generation factor and come up with an answer. Well, somewhat of an answer, because those missing middle development, likely just like residences are going to be, heavier in some places, lighter in other places. So it's only going to be a projection. But at the moment, without knowing what the details of missing middle are, we can't really say, oh yeah, it's going to create a tidal wave or a trickle of additional enrollment.
Thank you, Mr. Goldstein. Ms. McSweeney, would you like to ask your question?
Thank you. Good evening. I wanted to know if there's been any improvement on suspension rates, especially in our high schools. I was, starting to take a look at the data. Do you have a sense of whether it's improving or what could be done by APS to help lower the number of specifically Black and Latino students who seem to be getting suspended in an outsized proportion to their population in the schools?
So at the risk of sounding overly optimistic, I do believe that we are making progress on this. I can tell you that we are not at the spot where suspension rates equal, enrollment percentages. But I do believe we're making progress. Now, one of the things we've done is created a department or sub-department of called Student Climate and Culture. And they tell me that every time there is an incident in a school, which many times in the past have resulted in suspensions, our folks from that department go there, talk to the student, find out what's going on. It's not an automatic, punishment, suspension. Now, reducing the disproportionality of suspension rates is one of our strategic plan goals. And we are having a briefing, I think it's a monitoring item, might be a work session, on the strategic plan coming up next week or the weekend, very shortly, within the next couple of weeks. So my hope and recommendation is watch that for more detail, but in the meantime, I will try and find out where we are with suspension rates and get that information back to Mike.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Assistant Secretary. The next question is going to come from those that pre-registered, and it's an important topic to the NAACP, but could you tell us what's being currently implemented to address the achievement gap?
So as everybody knows, we went through a couple of difficult years with the pandemic. Virtual instruction is not the same as in-person instruction. This was the source of a lot of the problems we've already talked about with mental health, the social and emotional learning, but also with achievement. The superintendent has implemented a literacy goal literacy and numeracy in both the math and the English language arts departments to address the achievement gap, through those two core topics, core subjects. I know you're going to ask me, and what do the results look like? And I don't know that we know that at this point in the school year, because the standards of learning tests and other, standardized test measures haven't been taken for this school year. So my only answer there is we have to keep track. We have to look at what those results are, when those tests are taken. And past experience as a guide, those tests are taken, middle of the spring, April, May, something like that. But we don't have all of the results and conclusions usually until summer or the beginning of the school year.
All right, awesome. We appreciate that honesty. We'll certainly be following up. We'll do one more question and then we'll transition over to Chair Dorsey. But this member was asking about how do we address the racial disparities in schools, PTAs, and staffing needs?
Well, we've talked about, the question came up about recruiting and retention. And I'll be supplying a, more of a follow-up answer, when I get detail from the staff. Racial disparities in schools, do you mean in test scores, or do you mean in enrollment? As we all know, some schools have, a small percentage of African-American students, other schools have larger percentages. So I'm not 100% sure of, what question you want me to answer here.
Okay, gotcha. We will reach out to that member and see if we can get some more clarity. Would it be all right if we send you a list of questions that we weren't able to get to kind of circulate to the members?
Absolutely. Happy to send those over to staff, get answers, get back to you with the answer so you can distribute them.
Okay, awesome. We appreciate that. And just a point of personal privilege, what can the NAACP do to be a stronger partner with Arlington Public Schools?
That's a great question, and thank you for that offer. I think off the top of my head, I would say that my answer would be the same as to any parent organization. Do your best to help your students stay in touch with the school work, the teacher, the administration, because I think somebody talked about the triangle, the power of the triangle, the students, the parents, and the APS staff. And, truly that magic triangle, or whatever it's called, is the thing that, guarantees success, or goes a long way towards guaranteeing success for our students. So anything you can do in support of parents and students is going to pay benefits, and we thank you for it.
Okay, awesome. If we could give Chair Goldstein a virtual round of applause, we certainly appreciate you being here with us this evening. At this time, we'd like to transition over to Chair Dorsey, who is the chair of the Arlington County Board. Mr. Dorsey is, again, currently the chair, having been first elected in 2015. He also served on the board of directors for the Metropolitan Washington Council of Government since 2016. Mr. Dorsey, thank you for being with us this evening.
Thank you, President Heminger. It's good to be with you all. Great turnout for the meeting tonight, and I appreciate having the opportunity to share the agenda with Chair Goldstein and tell you a little bit about the priorities that I'm bringing to attention for the county board this year. But really, I want to spend the bulk of the time answering your questions. So I'll get right to it. So as Mr. Heminger said, I've been on the board since 2016 and have served, in addition to in my Arlington capacity, have served on the board of the Metropolitan Washington Council of Governments Board of Directors for that entire time as well, and have just finished my tenure as chairman of that organization. And as I think about the 2023 priorities for the county, they very much align with the work that I've been doing regionally. And I'll just talk about a few of them, and then again, spend most of my time ready for any questions that you have. First and foremost, for me, as I've thought about my service to the community, has been to ensure that we get it right when it comes to thinking about government and equity, particularly racial equity and justice. In 2019, I began bringing this work to the attention of county government, and I want to continue a focus on the next stage of that work in 2023. We've spent the last 4 years looking to normalize equity within government and also within the community, getting people to understand what it is and is not, why it necessarily requires a racial focus in order to be real, how it's not just simply a matter of, doing a, highly publicized program and calling it a day, but really doing the hard work of building the infrastructure of an organization to be able to implement equity throughout everything that it does in a way that is real and tangible for people. That work, I do believe, has been well normalized. Our next stage is how to operationalize it. And that's going to come with seeing equity imbued in everything that government works on, not just the reports that staff does to analyze a particular issue and to form the basis of a recommendation for the board to ultimately decide upon, but you'll see it in places like the construction of our operating budget, making sure that the impact of the dollars that we propose to invest are fully understood for who they will benefit, who they will burden, but also that we are able to think about where investments aren't being made and whether or not that is appropriate in light of historical patterns and practices. I also want to see it in how we actually work with our neighborhoods and communities. And we have a demonstration project that is on tap for 2023, working in the Green Valley neighborhood to engage residents like they've never been engaged before, to work on not what are government's priorities and government plans for the neighborhood, but to really develop a community-centered vision for what ought to be priorities that not only government can work on, that community residents can work on, but also other stakeholders like businesses and community groups as well. A lot more on that front, happy to share it, and certainly am excited if you have questions about it. A big focus of my board service has always been about housing, the primacy of housing, and working to make sure that not only are we able to provide a range of affordability options, but options overall. You know, Arlington has contributed to this region's lack of sufficient growth in housing to meet our needs, and that has made the cost of housing more unattainable for more people. Or in other words, a select few are benefiting from the status quo. So a desire to ensure that we are, one, adding sufficient supply to keep up with regional demand and growth, and that two, that housing become available at locations and in types that expand the net of people who can buy into a piece of Arlington County. Many of you know one such effort towards that end, the Missing Middle Housing Initiative, but it is by no means the only thing that we're doing on housing, whether it be looking at planning for additional units to be centered on and around Langston Boulevard in North Arlington, looking at the historic investment that we made in the Barcroft community and the types of opportunities that we may have to serve residents of Southwestern Arlington for decades to come. We are looking all across our county at places that we've historically planned for housing and places where we haven't, to ensure that we can not only meet the housing supply targets, but provide the choices that are necessary for all Arlingtonians to have an opportunity to have a stake, a long-term stake in this community. I'm also focused on climate and energy sustainability. When we think about the future for our children, it doesn't look great if we are not going to be attentive to the emerging climate needs and really trying to be as aggressive as possible at reducing greenhouse gas emissions, and also leveraging the power of participating in a greener economy, and the fact that that create lots of benefits for people in the form of ultimately lower cost energy, but also the jobs that come from being engaged in a green energy economy. I'm also very attentive to the role of transit in our community. Been a member of the Metro Board in the past, and am a big believer that a central way that we combat climate change is to get more people taking more trips with transit. One of the things that I would like to pursue in this year is how do we get to a place where we are offering more useful and more affordable forms of transit, up to and including the possibility of, at least for some portion of the day, incentivizing people to ride transit with very low or no fare options, at least for Arlington transit on our ART buses. In addition to those big things, there's also the work of county government, which is going to have some milestones in this year that I'm very much looking forward to. our Community Oversight Board, which I cannot ever mention without a big hat tip and thank you to the NAACP for your clarion call for getting in front of police reform even before it became something that everyone else was leaning into, but also for your steadfast participation in the process that resulted in the police practices group recommendations that led to our Community Oversight Board, which will soon be certified as ready to perform all of its functions under its enabling legislation. I'm excited to see that happen probably in March of this year. We have, in addition to the Community Oversight Board, we have an independent policing auditor office, which is staffed at this point and doing great work. And we know that that is a critical measure of accountability that we need to have in order to foster community trust in policing, which, of course, given the events that were publicized on Friday, video and the brutal assault and death of Tyree Nichols, we all know that we can't ever be complacent when it comes to ensuring that we have a culture that does not condone violence and actually creates a culture of respect and caring from those people who are sworn to serve and protect the community. We know that that doesn't happen without careful caretaking and stewardship. And that's something that I am very much interested in always paying attention to in Arlington County. And the last thing that I'll mention is big picture, Arlington's ability to, the luxury that we've had to be able to make investments in our community, ones that not necessarily all communities are always able to make, is not something that we can take for granted and is assured. And we have some pretty tough economic circumstances that are hanging over us. And one of the central symptoms of this is that we have underutilized office space due to what is still a very pandemic era posture for many businesses, not requiring people to work in the office very much, if at all. And one of the things that I am looking to do both in Arlington and regionally is to coordinate a return to work strategy that brings together businesses, the public sector, as well as the transit providers to ensure that we can facilitate a smooth return to work for however much companies will require it of their workers, because that is important for our real estate tax base. It's also important for all of the small businesses that support a daytime population of workers. It's important for the health and vitality of our community. And if we're going to get ourselves on a sustainable long-term footing, we've got to start addressing those issues now. And so I'll leave it at that. Some of the big things that I've got on my radar for the year ahead. But again, most importantly is our discussion. So please come with your questions and advice.
Thank you, Chair Dorsey. Our first question will come from Ms. Clark. Do you want to ask your question?
Yes, Chairman Dorsey, this is Portia Clark, President of Green Valley Civic Association. You mentioned your priority in working with neighborhoods like Green Valley to develop a community-centered vision. When and how do you plan on engaging the Green Valley Civic Association in this effort? And then at the past Saturday's board meeting, you talked about the John Robinson Town Square issues with a public comment about restrooms and so forth, but we've not heard from staff, even though these issues have gone to county staff several times.
Thank you, Portia, and it's good to hear you. I'll take the second part first. So we did have someone from the community who brought up concern about the lack of restrooms at the Robinson Town Square. So we addressed that to that respondent at the time. It was our understanding from staff that there have been some conversations with members of the community with DPR about looking at some intermediate and potential long-term solutions. I haven't gotten a report back as to which staff are directly engaged with that. But when I do, I'll be happy to forward that along so you can be sure to plug into that effort. And the other initiative that I spoke about is one that we've had brief conversations with. We're currently focusing on what will be a low barrier request for proposals to meet the general vision that I've outlined, which we hope will invite participants from the community who are interested in facilitating that work. We very much want it to not be a typical Arlington process. We feel that the typical processes yield typical results, and we're looking to really see if there's a different way that we can engage people who have been poorly served by the way we currently do business. So that is going through the process of being drafted. Once we have greater clarity on what that draft looks like, I will share it with interested parties in Green Valley, and we will work from there. My goal is to hopefully have this launched by late spring and substantially concluded by year's end. So stay tuned.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Hines, do you want to ask your question?
Yes, single-family zoning is by history, operation, and effect racist. And I was sorry that we didn't hear more of that in the ongoing housing discussion. And can you discuss that or explain that, or is it too ticklish an issue, do you think? I just think it ought to be front and center.
Thank you, Craig. And you know, I think it's depending on which conversation you've been a part of. It's been certainly mentioned front and center. It's not anything that your sentiments I agree with completely. The exclusionary nature of zoning has no practical planning legitimate reason. It was entirely born of a desire to exclude people of certain races from being in certain areas that would then be monopolized by, in this case, whites, who would use those areas to not only separate themselves from others, but as it turns out, to accumulate massive amounts of wealth at the expense of others. This is pretty clear history. It's indisputable. I will say that as part of the community conversations that we've had throughout Arlington, there are some people who do not appreciate that being a part of the conversation. And look, we all understand why. Unfortunately, people sometimes feel like uncomfortable conversations make them personally culpable. And what I hope to do throughout this process and throughout many others, as we normalize these conversations about equity, is to get people to understand that when it comes to our circumstances and conditions, you may not be personally guilty, but we are all responsible. And for us to take that responsibility and not, as the kids would say, to get in our feelings about it. Our point is we have a clear path to chart a better future by understanding the implications of things that were done before. It's not about feeling guilty or self-righteous. It's about acknowledging what needs to be done. There are many people in our community who have heard that and who get that, and who, despite their status as a homeowner in a neighborhood that's never ever been looked at for, new zoning or new government attention, have nonetheless embraced this effort because they understand that the fruits of the poisonous tree, if you will, can be reversed by a pretty low cost reform. And that is to just open up more opportunities. So I don't shy away from that conversation. I don't think it's lost on a lot of people who are a part of this from the board level, but I will say that we do often find that when we do talk about it in some circumstances, we then spend a lot less time talking about the merits of the policy and trying to make people not feel as guilty as they tend to feel.
Thank you. Ms. Pennington, I'm sorry, actually, let's go to Ms. McGowan in the chat. And she says, what is the county board doing to help seniors on a fixed income afford homes they currently own, other than, than exemption and or deferral of real estate taxes that they must qualify for? Sure.
That was LaTanya. That's the primary vehicle that we have. Over the course of the last few years, I co-chaired an initiative in 2017 to look at our real estate tax relief program and to update it so that it was modernized, but also had much more generous income and asset requirements for people to take advantage of either a full real estate tax exemption or a deferral of taxes until there was a transaction in the property if they were seniors or disabled. And that is really the primary way that we can help people who are on fixed or limited incomes be able to afford what are rising property taxes, even if we don't ever increase the tax rate, as residential home values have essentially increased each and every year since I've been on the board. And, you know, there's little that we can do in terms of state code to limit the impact on certain groups, but where we do have an opportunity is for seniors, the disabled, and for veterans. And I would say that with the various expansion of income and asset eligibility, we have been able to, I believe, take care of the most in-need seniors in our community.
Thank you, Ms. Pennington, and then we'll go to the Chair of Criminal Justice Committee.
Hello, Chairman Dorsey. Thank you for being with us. I have a question that's semi-related to housing. Does the board have any plans to convert sort of the empty office buildings in the county into apartments? I live in Crystal City and I currently live across from an empty office building. And so I have just thought like, oh, people could just live there.
Thank you so much. We are looking at this intently. So we've had some study of this from an economics perspective, and we're also having our chief building official work with owners of office buildings that could potentially be converted to really look at what the path would be. As we have learned through the work of our staff thus far, it's not as easy to convert every office building to a residential structure because of how office buildings of a certain age and vintage were constructed. Effectively, it would be more cost effective in a lot of cases to just tear it down and rebuild new. But where it is viable, where it does make sense, we have offered technical assistance to really make that path a lot easier for somebody who might own commercial property. You know, of course, we study it and make sure that the impacts of converting from office to residential don't cause issues with our existing planning for a particular area. But we are very much open to the concept because, you know, where we do have a surplus of office space that could be better purposed to provide more of those housing choices that could hopefully add to the inventory of what is less expensive than what is currently available is absolutely what we need to do. Unfortunately, they're not like 3 or 4 projects where I could say, I know it's going to happen or I know it could happen. That study is ongoing, but we are very much committed to helping make it happen.
Awesome. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Our next question will come from the Chair of the Criminal Justice Committee. Madam Chair, do you want to ask your question?
Hi, good evening, Mr. Dorsey. It's nice to meet you.
Good evening. How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you. I have a question for you that is something I'm going to touch on when I give my remarks about our activity in our Criminal Justice Committee. We all have a concern about what you as the chair and as liaison to the Community Oversight Board, what your plans are concretely for community engagement, both in order to get input for the members of the Community Oversight Board about the impacts felt by members of our community who are over-policed, and also how you plan concretely to educate the public about what the COB's powers and responsibilities are, so that members of the community are aware of how they can go about initiating an investigation, what is effective to initiate an investigation, what isn't effective to initiate an investigation, and how members of the public can have some influence over policing policies and procedures going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kelly. Great questions. So we have been focused since we impaneled the COB with getting them ready to do their work. And that has involved dozens of hours of training for each member. It's included both sort of classroom style lecture training with organizations like the National Association for Civilian Oversight of Law Enforcement, Arlington Police Department, various agencies, departments within county government. They've also done a fair amount of practical training with ride-alongs with the police department. They will soon do some real experiential learning where they'll understand use of force a little bit more concretely than maybe people can understand from listening to a lecture or reading a textbook. And so all of that training has been a prerequisite before they can be ready to work. But at the same time, they've also been developing a community outreach plan so that once they are ready, they didn't want to put the cart before the horse and start engaging and making commitments and without the full breadth of what it is they are empowered to do. But they have developed a draft community outreach plan that involves inviting groups to meet with members either in small groups or as a whole, and then also they themselves going out into various venues that want to invite the COB to actually share the information, just as you mentioned. What members of the public need to know now under this regime where we do have civilian oversight of law enforcement, how they, first of all, what the powers are, how you can connect with the COB, what are the types of things that are against policy that you shouldn't tolerate, what are the things that if you see, what you should be able to provide in order to hopefully have a conclusive investigation into whatever allegations you bring. So all of that is their next stage that will come beyond readiness. So in terms of a timetable, I expect after we reach that readiness standpoint in March, the period then late spring through summer will really all be about that two-way engagement to really make sure the community is connected to it.
And if I can just quickly add to that, I appreciate the training that the members have had so far, but I want to express on behalf of the Criminal Justice Committee some concern that we have that the training has all been or has been mostly provided by ACPD, and there hasn't been, at least in the training section, any access to concerns of over-policed members of the community. And so I think that is an important, we would have liked to have seen that as part of the training so that they understand, not just from the ACPD's standpoint. So we hope that the access to members of the community begins before spring and summer, and we'll do our best, at least from the community, from the Criminal Justice Committee, to invite members to come and speak with our committee and help get that training off the ground.
Well, I'm sure they'll take you up on those conversations, but also remember, these were people who were selected from approximately 100 individuals who responded to our request to apply for the COB. So they come in with a good breadth of understanding of some of the community-centered issues that bring us to actually stand up a COB. So while I know you can look at the dozens of hours of training and see that from the oversight perspective, there's been, this much, and from the ACPD perspective, there's been this much. The members came in with a fair amount of community understanding and perspectives beforehand. What they didn't have was the technical training in at least what law enforcement does, which we have long believed that if you're going to be an provide effective oversight of an agency, you need to know what that agency not only does, but how its members are taught, what its culture is, and those are not necessarily designed to get them to become what's the word? I'm sympathetic to the ACPD perspective, but really to provide effective oversight, because it will not be making, arriving at findings and making recommendations in a vacuum. It will be with direct knowledge of what this agency is supposed to be about.
Thank you for that. And I want to make sure that I'm very clear that we are not suggesting that there was any design to build in bias, nor are we calling into question the commitment of the folks who applied to be and were selected to be on the Community Oversight Board. Just the fact of the matter is that access to impacted community, to the impacted sectors of the community is a really as critical a part of understanding for well-intentioned people who applied for and were selected to the board as hearing from ACPD. Not suggesting there was any untoward design, just inviting and welcoming an opportunity for our community to be part of the discussion and the training process and access. And we will invite them and make sure that we get an opportunity to speak to them at our committee meetings. Thank you so much.
Well taken. And I know that I'll look forward to facilitating that for them for sure.
Excellent. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Dorsey, do you have time for a couple more questions?
Absolutely.
Great. The next one is the elephant in the room. It's a two-part question. Could you give your opinion on how the elimination of 8 plexes or limiting to potentially 4 will impact people of color and also people with disabilities?
So I was disappointed that the board by majority vote decided to eliminate consideration of 7 and 8 plex buildings as part of the expanded housing options work. You know, I look at the next 2 months of process to arrive at a final draft ordinance is one that is best served by not eliminating options prematurely, because it's not just about whether you have 7 or 8. There's a dozen other topic areas that to some degree are interrelated. And for me, the best possible solutions come from having all of those options on the table. The benefit of 7 and 8 plexes has always been when you look at affordability or attainability of these expanded housing options, the more units at a smaller square footage that you can get on a parcel, the more affordable they will be. In addition to location, housing costs are often driven by size of unit and other ancillary properties. And so as you think about an 8-plex or 7-plex, that provides a lower per square footage yield for each unit, which may make it more attainable, which may make it something that provides options for people who have accessibility and mobility issues, may make it possible to just expand the net for more people. So I was disappointed that option is now no longer before us. But we also have to work with the bounds that we have, and that includes up to 6 units. And my job, my hope over the next couple of months is to craft the best possible solution with that as the North Star, with all of the other options on the table. So, you know, the work is ongoing. I can't allow my personal disappointment to distract from what is still a very important need for us to get this policy right.
Thank you. Appreciate that. 2 more. The next one came from a pre-registered guest. The NAACP sent the county board a letter last January outlining a series of critical improvements needed to fix the county's fair housing enforcement, education, outreach, and policymaking processes, including adding source of funds as a protected class under the Human Rights Ordinance. Can you please provide an update on when the county will make these needed changes?
Yes, thank you. So the county is actually one of the seven jurisdictions that is participating in a regional fair housing plan. It's the first time in decades that the region has coordinated on a fair housing plan. And Arlington, again, joined 6 other communities as being the principal agencies that are supporting the drafting of that. a nexus between my work with the Council of Governments in Arlington County. As part of that, many of the expanded opportunities for education are a part of that plan and will soon be adopted at the regional level. Arlington is a principal signatory. And from that, we are going to add source of funds among the changes to our next review of our human rights ordinance. That process was intended to be completed in spring of 2022, but the commission, like all of our commissions, made up of volunteers, and they're, in addition to source of funds, also considering a number of other changes that they'd like to recommend to the human rights ordinance, and they just haven't completed that work of fully vetting and drafting the changes that they would like the board to consider. I do expect that will happen sometime this spring. In hindsight, if we had all known that the whole thing was going to take a lot longer, we would have moved source of funds on its own in 2022. But at the time, we thought that it would be best to just look at the ordinance once with the comprehensive set of changes, but that has taken a lot longer than we ever thought. But there is absolutely no issue with, first, the Human Rights Commission itself wanting to add source of funds to the human rights ordinance, nor the board or our staff. So as soon as those changes are brought before us, that particular one, I know has a very, very strong likelihood of being adopted.
Awesome, thank you so much. I want to give the last question to Second Vice President Coleman, and if you could maybe potentially clear up some of the misinformation in the chat before your question, I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. So just briefly, I'd like to put forward that legalizing missing middle homes promotes income diversity in our neighborhoods. When torn down houses become missing middle homes, they create opportunities for more families to live on the property, and they cost much less than McMansions that would have probably been built there instead. Many new missing middle homes will cost even less than the single detached homes that are replaced. And there's no credible evidence, to the best of my knowledge, that missing middle homes are going to induce some sort of property value increase such that people could not afford their property taxes. From what I understand, the county board has many different tools at its disposal in order to help homeowners pay on their property taxes. So I think that premise is fairly faulty and shouldn't be paraded anymore. But moving to my question, I wanted to know if the county has any plans to investigate the usage of a broadband authority to help address the digital divide. We've seen this only worsen with the pandemic, and it has plagued a lot of our most vulnerable students. So I just wanted to know your opinions on that.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Vice President Coleman. So the digital divide is an issue that we have a consultant right now who's working with us to both study the true nature of what our divide is. So, we know that we don't have the issues as currently defined by state and federal regulators in terms of not having multiple competing providers of broadband to areas of our county. We don't have areas where they don't operate because of the socioeconomic demographics of people who live there. So one of the things that we're trying to do is to actually develop a locally based definition of what our divide is. And it's really going to look at not just the baseline availability of broadband, but the quality of broadband that one is able to utilize. And we're looking to apply the most aggressive standard that is looked at federally, not just access, not just, minimum download speeds of, 25 megabits per second, 10 megabit per second uploads, but symmetric high upload and download speed, so that we're really talking about the quality of broadband that makes it possible for multiple people in a household to engage in intensive broadband activities. If you have a child at home doing virtual learning with a parent who's doing virtual meetings, and you don't have good upload and download speeds, then, you know, you really don't have quality broadband. So we're looking to come up with a locally based definition that really meets the needs of what we have, and then come up with a true sense of who is inadequately served. Once we have that, the consultant's next body of work is to stand up what are the possible ways that you can do it, including with the provision of municipal broadband being one of the options that we would like feasibility done on. And when I say feasibility, it's not about whether or not it's legal, not about whether or not you know, there's the technical ability to get it done, but how it stands in relation to all of the other options to meet whatever it is that gap that is identified is. That work will be completed. I cannot remember, Brian, what quarter it's expected this year, but it's not long term. It's actually, I think, nearing the end of phase 1, and then it will move into that phase 2 feasibility. I think we should really have that body of work by this summer. If that timeline is not accurate, I will make sure I correct it with you.
All right, thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Second VP, and thank you, Mr. Chair, for being with us this evening. We really appreciate it. We look forward to playing an active role in Plan Langston Boulevard. We know we're not quite out of the woods with Missing Middle. We're still fully engaged there as well. But we certainly appreciate your time tonight. If all of our members could please give the chair a virtual round of applause. We really appreciate your time tonight. Thanks so much.
Thank you all. Thank you. Appreciate the invitation.
Thank you. All right, moving things along. We didn't get to introduce our new third vice president, so I wanted to take a moment to recognize our third VP. Are you with us this evening?
Hello, good evening. I'm here.
All right. Do you want to address the members and just say a couple words?
Well, just good evening, everyone. Apologies for joining late. I had another conflict this evening, so I did miss a lot of the conversation, but I'll rewatch the conversation and hopefully I can chime in at some point then.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Madam Third VP. Let's move over to our committee chairs. Tonight, we're going to hear from scholarship, criminal justice, and housing. So, Ms. Adora, is there anything you'd like to add when it comes to, or as it comes to scholarships?
I think she left after she spoke earlier.
Okay, awesome.
No, I'm here. I was just trying to get off mute. It's weird on my phone.
Gotcha. Take your time.
I swear to God, I'm getting rid of this iPhone as soon as I can. And nothing more, just you know, just to reiterate my plea to our membership to support our scholarships. That's all.
Awesome. We appreciate that. Madam Criminal Justice Chair, are you still with us?
I sure am.
Awesome. Would you like to give the members a brief update on what's been going on in Criminal Justice Committee?
Happy to do so. And I probably tipped my hand quite a bit with the questions that I had for the chair of county board, and really appreciate the responses that we got. So so membership is aware. We are our Criminal Justice Committee, very pleased to serve under the new leadership of President Heminger. Very excited to work with President Heminger as we continue in our quest for oversight of police policies and practices and allegations of misconduct by the Community Oversight Board. One thing we want to make sure that membership is aware of is that passage of the ordinance that created the Community Oversight Board and certification of readiness is not all that's on the table in the near future. There is in the ordinance a requirement for there to be a memorandum of understanding that actually puts some leaves on the tree of the Community Oversight Board's procedures and some of the details of what the COB is entitled to do as part of their investigatory process. So that memorandum of understanding is in the process of being drafted by the Community Oversight Board. by the independent policing auditor, ACPD, and the community, the county manager, with input from the county board. And as we understand, once the draft is in final format, there will be an opportunity for community comment before it is finalized. And I put that on everyone on our membership's radar screen because it is going to be important for the MOU to enhance what is already authorized by the ordinance. And we want to make sure that we have membership prepared to speak to community interest in into what the COB is going to do in practice and how they're going to do it. So be on the lookout for publication by the COB. They will put it on their website, and we will publicize the date when the community, or when public comment is invited. So that is what's coming up soon. We are hopeful to have an active response to that so that we can be heard before the memorandum of understanding is finalized. That's most of what we have to report for now. Our committee meets on the fourth Wednesday of the month. If you have interest in participating in joining our Criminal Justice Committee, let us know. Happy to speak with you about what it entails. And we have a lot of good work ahead this year, especially early on, and welcome your input and your questions.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Madam Chair. Any questions for criminal justice before we talk about housing? And they have a lot to talk about. Any questions for criminal justice? All right, thanks so much, Madam Chair. We appreciate all that you're doing. All right, let's bring up some folks from housing, if that's all right. I'm gonna look for Wells and Kellen, and second VP, feel free to go ahead and get started.
Sure, thank you. First, apologies everyone. My internet connection has just been really insufferable today. So if I kind of glitch in and out, please be patient. So let's start off first with missing middle, just because there are a couple of pressing actions that I would really like to cover in the time I have. So as I mentioned earlier, we do have an event at Callaway UMC coming up soon. It's going to be February the 8th from 7 until 8:30 p.m. There will be a virtual component for those who can't attend in person. So I want to make that clear now. And this weekend, we're going to be passing out flyers in the Halls Hill community to also reach those areas that traditionally have been left out of the conversation. So if you'd be willing to help some of the committee members and I distribute flyers, I really appreciate that. Just reach out to me, either put your information in the chat, or you can reach me by my phone number, which I will include later on. Moving on to the Serrano Apartments. So I and Janet Valenzuela visited the Serrano Apartments on the 20th of this month. And unfortunately, a lot of the issues that we have been facing over the last years are still persisting to this day. Having had the opportunity to speak with the current CEO, Paul Bernard, as well as I think it was Jennifer Endo, there you go, who was also at the meeting, in addition to our secretary, Wanda Younger, and Marjorie Green. We heard of some of their plans to first implement a 100% inspection sweep of the units, I believe on the 27th of February. They've also said the AHC board is conducting strategic planning that has a goal of being more resident-centric in their operations. One of the main priorities that we have at the NAACP is to ensure that first and foremost, their communications, which seem to be an overarching problem with their operations, are addressed. Some of the issues have included not communicating well to the tenants when heat or water goes out, that there are sources available to them. As many of you know, Toronto property has a large Hispanic community that perhaps Spanish is their first and only language they speak fluently. And I've seen that they distribute a lot of their informational flyers only in English. And so addressing those kind of disparities will go a long way in being able to better the relationship between AHC as well as the tenants and advocates. But we are still involved in a process where monthly will be updated on the progress made by AHC. And we recently stood up a subcommittee within the Housing Committee to specifically handle issues related to AHC. So if you also like to get involved with that, again, please reach out to me or Wells with your contact info. Next, I want to talk just briefly about, see here, there we go, Plan Langston Boulevard. So as mentioned earlier, we're still engaged with Plan Langston Boulevard, and we are pushing hard to have the county meet its stated goals as part of the Affordable Housing Master Plan. So far, their plan falls about 1,000 units short of the goal that they've set for themselves for 2040. So we're still engaging the county board on that matter. We've also stood up a subcommittee specifically for Plan Langston Boulevard. So if you're interested in that, please, again, reach out to me at your convenience. And furthermore, we do have the second annual Arlington Fair Housing Conference, which is taking place this April. We've reached out to Marymount University to see if they can help us navigate working with them and hosting the conference there, but that process is still ongoing. With that, I will turn it over to Wells to handle any related issues with the Housing Committee.
Thanks, Mr. Second VP and Housing Committee Chair. So you pretty well covered it. I don't want to take the group's time, but Kellen might also have a thing or two to say about some of our other efforts to cooperate with our regional partners and work together toward affirmatively furthering fair housing and other housing initiatives. So if Kellen might want to speak to some of those.
Yeah, Kellen, before you get started, the reason why I brought Kellen up as well was Kellen was recently appointed to be chair of the Housing Commission in Arlington. So if we could all just give him a huge round of applause. It's a very important position in the county. The NAACP takes up a lot of Kellen's time, and I can imagine being chair of the Housing Commission is going to take up a lot more. And we're incredibly grateful for your service, Kellen. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Appreciate that, and appreciate the opportunity to continue working with the NAACP and the Housing Commission to ensure that we can make housing within Arlington more accessible, safer, and more decent for all residents. So as Wells had mentioned, and I think I put in the chat, that the regional fair housing plan is supposed to, fingers crossed, be released by the Metropolitan Washington Council of Governments tomorrow. It's been delayed by over a year, so that's why, fingers crossed, it'll come out tomorrow. For public comment, I believe we're looking at 60 days of public comment, and the NAACP, in order to help people digest this. So I think the executive summary is like 30 pages, the actual report's like 1,000 pages. It's a lot because it covers all the jurisdictions in Northern Virginia, DC, and Montgomery County. But it is, I think, a really comprehensive plan that outlines, at least at a high level, the direction that Arlington and our neighbors need to be heading in order to really take fair housing seriously, and especially considering that the Biden administration has released the interim final rule on affirmatively furthering fair housing, which is going to have significant impacts on HUD funding and making sure that localities are proactively integrating fair housing into the work that they do, not just responding to discrimination complaints, but making sure that they're doing equity analysis in their housing programs making sure that they're not taking decisions like they made at the board meeting last week around missing middle, which goes against equity principles, but that they're really putting front and center who's impacted by this decision, and how do we make sure that historically disadvantaged groups are going to be benefiting from what we're doing. So we're looking at hosting, I think the tentative date right now is February 23rd, a panel discussion with the Metropolitan Washington Council of Governments in Arlington County to talk through what's in the Regional Fair Housing Plan, what does it mean for Arlington, what's its impact going to be, and provide information about people as how they can, participate in the public comment process as we work to finalize this, and ensure that all the local governments throughout the region are working together to really advance fair housing.
All right, any additional comments? Ms. Robinson, I see you have your hand raised. You have a question?
Good evening, and yes, I had a question concerning two areas of the public, our veterans and also our returning citizens. And I was wondering if we have any numbers on what type of housing is being provided for citizens. I've heard from several groups of people that I work with that sometimes the size of these apartments that are being developed and put in are in kind of tight for some of our veterans and returning citizens, that they don't remain in them and they're out on the street, perhaps getting in trouble. I'm wondering what type of housing considerations are being made for veterans and their particular needs, and what type of housing. I understand that there is some what's called transitional housing in Arlington. Are there any numbers on how many such residences are being constructed, and how many actual people can these residences hold, and what type of population of returning citizens specific to Arlington? Do we have any numbers on that? Because it's my understanding in some areas of the DMV, we have large numbers of returning citizens who have been incarcerated 10, 20 plus years and returning to society. Housing is a major issue, especially transitional housing, transitioning from whatever society was when these people left to the world they're coming out and finding right now. Thank you.
I can take a first stab at that. So Arlington works with a number of nonprofit partners, especially around returning citizens. So OAR, Offender Aid and Restoration, is probably the primary nonprofit that helps provide a range of services for returning citizens. And that includes helping them work with the county to ensure that they can find adequate, safe housing. There's challenges that come with that depending on the reason they were incarcerated. Unfortunately, in Virginia, it is not illegal to discriminate against someone based on them having a criminal record or even an arrest record. That's something that we've advocated around in the past. Unfortunately, I think the current General Assembly is not interested in making changes in this regard. But the county has a partnership with its nonprofit affordable housing partners to house basically hard to house individuals, especially individuals who were incarcerated for violent crimes or sex offenses. They work with like APA or AHC or Wesley Housing to try to find housing for them. And I think that's typically, when we talk about transitional housing, some of what we're talking about. Also, unfortunately, a lot of the recently returned citizens end up in our shelter system because they don't have credit, they don't have money, they may not have family or anyone who's able to support them when they leave prison. And so that's something that the county again works with Pathways and other nonprofits to try to make sure that they at least get into a shelter, and then from there can figure out how to build up their credit or do other things to try to get them housed. So I know we have a number of programs related to recently incarcerated and returning citizens. There's certainly a lot more that can be done to support them, and especially depending on the offense, it can be incredibly challenging to house them even with the nonprofit partners. So especially adult sex offenders, there's only like one shelter in the DC area that will even house them. And it's just very difficult, and a lot more work needs to be done on that front. I don't have any information about returning veterans, other than I know that Arlington committed to ending veteran homelessness and did consider that to be a success. I think that was 2011 that they effectively ended veteran homelessness in the county. So that's something that they continue to work to make sure that there are no, new veteran people who are homeless within the county. But I don't have a lot of information about what specific programs are offered to veterans returning back to civilian life.
I did have an objection to something that you probably didn't notice, and that is the statement about violent offenders. Not all of the people who are returning are violent offenders, and I think when people have objections to these people being in their communities, it's because when we speak of ex-offenders, we tend to think of them as being violent, when in fact there were a lot of non-violent offenders who are returning, and even innocent people who are returning that can't afford to live in the neighborhoods that they grew up in. And so we want to know how to best express our voice and our interest, because if you're saying that the board wouldn't even hear any arguments about missing housing, which was a matter of equity, how do we expect them to even address the issue in a most serious form about ex-offenders, many whom are not violent offenders? And I do applaud Arlington County for the efforts that they've made towards violent offenders getting fair housing, because that doesn't go on in a lot of places, but there are many who are not. And so when people mention it in the same sentence with violent offenders, people tend to think that they're only violent offenders who are being released, and that is not the case. So I think we need to change the story and the narrative. So if you're going to represent us, please, let's have more consideration for innocent people and for non-violent offenders who've been locked up for many, many years.
Yeah, and apologies.
And that's not picking on you personally.
No. And I just apologies for that. When I talked about violent offenders, I was more so referring to the particularly hard to house returning.
They're all hard to house. Once you have a felony, even though you paid your debt to society, and if we don't reword all of these things and rethink these things, we're going to continue to have these same problems.
Yeah, I totally agree. Ms. Robinson, it sounds like we could use you on our criminal justice committee. I'd love to get you plugged in criminal justice or housing. I was shaking my head and nodding yes to a lot of the stuff that you're saying. I think we're in agreement with you, and we would love to have your skill set and ability helping to guide us on some of these policies if you're willing and able. Immediate past president, I see your hand is up. I want to bring us home. Do you have something quick you want to add?
No, Mr. President, I was just going to commend this group of leaders that you have before us today, and for those that are on this call to recognize the amount of work and time and hours that each one of them have put in the Pacific area of housing. And that if you have any time available and you're interested in being involved in the housing battle, I call it, it's a battle right now, to come join them. Kathleen McSweeney put it perfectly clear in the chat. So I'll just leave it there, read her chat, because it's not just the NAACP, there's many other like-minded organizations that are out on this battlefield. So thank you, Wells, Brian, Kellen, and all, of course, Mr. President, for your leadership. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Just a couple announcements. I'm going to try to get us out of here at 9. If you're not a member of the NAACP, I just dropped the link in the chat. We want to encourage you to join us. We're on the battlefield, like the immediate past president said, day in and day out, and we're doing the good work of the people. But it takes all of us to be able to do that. The next thing I wanted to mention was we talked about our audit committee. We still need one more person. If you feel it in your heart to join that committee, It's really light lifting, not a lot of work, but we do need at least one more person to make sure that the books are balanced and that there's no anomalies. The next thing that I wanted to mention was we're currently appointing committee chairs. So, you know, if you have a passion for education or criminal justice or, you know, housing, whatever your passion is, we really want to get you involved with the NAACP. And we're currently making appointments for chair and vice chair. If you're interested, I'd love to hear from you. I want to close by reading one of my favorite quotes. And before I do, I just wanted to kind of let everyone know with housing, we still are fully engaged with that. We're going to be sending out a letter probably later this week. It needs to come before the executive committee for approval, but we do have some serious concerns with some of the actions and restrictions that the board has taken. And we hope that you'll take a look at that letter later this week. So here's a quote from John Lewis. Do not get lost in a sea of despair. Be hopeful, be optimistic. Our struggle is not the struggle of a day, a week, a month, or a year. It's the struggle of a lifetime. Never, ever be afraid to make some noise and get in good trouble, necessary trouble. Thank you all so much, NAACP Arlington branch. Have a great evening, and thank you for all that you're doing on the front lines. Good night.